The essential understanding for this lesson is, a rectangle can be divided into rows and columns of squares that are all the same size. You can count or add in different ways to find the total number of squares. Previously, students used equal shares to divide rectangles and circles into halves and fourths. In this lesson, students cover rectangles with square tiles arranged in rows and columns, and then count or use repeated addition to find the total number of squares. In this problem, students are shown a rectangle that is divided into rows and columns. This problem is key because students count and use repeated addition to find the total number of equal squares in the rectangle. Listen and look for students who begin by counting how many squares are in each row. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Since there are 4 rows, they add 5 4 times. So, there are 20 equal squares in this rectangle. Listen and look for other students who begin by counting how many squares are in each column. 1, 2, 3, 4. Since there are 5 columns, they add 4 5 times. These students also find that there are 20 equal squares in the rectangle. Have students share their work to see that they can count and add in different ways to find the total squares in a rectangle that is divided into rows and columns. Developing this understanding will help students later on as they use repeated addition to find the total objects in an array and connect multiplication to repeated addition.
How many red squares can cover this rectangle? Begin like this, not like this. Why must the squares be laid out the way they are in the top rectangle? The squares must be laid out the way they are in the top rectangle because the goal is to find the total number of red squares that exactly cover the rectangle, so there can be no gaps or overlaps. Count. Each row has 4 squares. How many rows are there? There are 3 rows. You can add the squares by rows. How many squares in all? 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals 12. There are 12 squares in all.
There is another way to count the squares.
Count. Each column has 3 squares. How many columns are there? There are 4 columns. You can add the squares by columns. 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 equals 12. There are 12 squares in all. Now you know how you can divide rectangles into equal squares.
I have a big rectangle and a little red square. I wonder how many little red squares can fit inside of the big rectangle. Well, let's figure it out. We want to start at a corner and line up red squares side by side without gaps or overlaps. So let's count. How many red squares can fit in each row? 1, 2, 3. 3 squares can fit in each row. Now let's add the rows to see how many squares can fit in the rectangle. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 rows. So 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 equals 12. You can also count by columns. Each column has 4 squares. So 4 plus 4 plus 4 equals 12. It's the same answer as before. Great teamwork! As you can see, dividing rectangles into equal squares is a piece of cake.